It's someone's child, someone's brother or sister, someone's friend, someone's significant other, who just happens to have an intellectual or developmental disability, maybe a type of physical disability, and maybe a mental health diagnosis to go along with it. But primarily, what I want you to understand is you are going to be here helping support someone's family member. That's a really important and really awesome thing. So we'll go to the next slide. And the next slide is basically a quick, very quick example of what a diagnosis is. For those of you who are not familiar with um, adults or people with developmental disabilities, I want to talk to you real quickly about what a diagnosis means. So when we talk about diagnosis, there is a what's called a primary diagnosis for someone. A primary diagnosis in this case is going to be an intellectual or developmental disability. And what that means is someone has been diagnosed between birth and when they turned 18 years old, and they've been diagnosed with some condition that is chronic and that is going to last for the rest of their life. Some examples of some of these diagnoses might be like cerebral palsy, epilepsy, vision and hearing impairments, processing issues. And so those are the types of primary diagnoses that we talk about. One thing I want to stress is it is not important that you're an expert in this subject matter to be a volunteer for this night. Okay, we're not trying to train you. I'm doing a 30-minute training on stuff that people work for 20 plus years to get experience in and to work in. So this is just a really broad overview. And so after you talk about a primary diagnosis, sometimes some of the people that we're serving may have a secondary diagnosis. And a secondary diagnosis just means exactly what it sounds like. It's second to whatever the primary diagnosis is. In this case, you might see a wide range of some mental health conditions. Okay, so you might see conditions that affect someone's mood, someone's thinking, or behaviors. And some examples of those diagnoses might be depression, a generalized anxiety disorder, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, things like that. And so sometimes the people that we're going to be supporting will have a primary diagnosis. All of them will have one. And sometimes they will have a secondary diagnosis. And the reason we talk about that is just important that you know and understand what that means. But I'll do behavior as a quick introduction, what behavior means. In my field, what a behavior means is it's the way in which a person acts in response to a particular situation or stimulus. Okay? So, as human beings, we all have behavior. So, however you react to a particular situation you're in is your behavior to that situation. However you behave to stimulus coming into your brain and how you process it, that is your behavior. And it's no different for the people we're going to be supporting. Now, a behavior can be modified according to a positive or negative reinforcements of someone's environment or according to their self-directed intentions. So what that means is if you've ever had a behavior that you're trying to change, for example, when I was in my teens, I used to bite my nails. We have any nail biters that are willing to admit it in the crowd? All right, one, a couple at least. A couple are with me, okay? So that was a behavior. It was my reaction to my environment or certain stimulus, okay? And what I did is along the way I decided I don't want to bite my nails anymore, so I modified that behavior through self-intentions, okay? Um, Now, the other term that we use in the field I work in is interfering behavior. Okay? Interfering behavior is a little different. It's any set of behaviors that cause harm to self or others and can be disruptive to a person's daily life functions. Okay? Some of the people that we're going to be supporting on this night may have some interfering behaviors. The good news and what I want you to know, and again, what I want to stress is it is not your job to know what the interfering behaviors completely look like. It's not your job to handle the interfering behaviors. All you're going to be doing is supporting them in this night of fun. We're going to have some individuals who are trained and who have experience in dealing with interfering behaviors. So, if that should become an issue, we would have people on hand that are able to respond to that and to get someone to where they need to go if they need to de-escalate from a behavior. And what that looks like is myself or someone else would help escort that person to separate rooms that we will have set up to help that person de-escalate. And sometimes it's very simple. Sometimes someone can get very overstimulated, especially when you got music, lights, people dancing, you got a lot of stuff going on. Okay, someone may get overwhelmed in that situation. And if that should happen, then we'll be prepared to respond to that situation. But another thing I want to stress is the likelihood that that's going to happen is very low and very minimum. In my particular company, we support about a little over 1,000 individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities every week. And overseeing that, I get reports whenever there's a significant behavior that happens. Now, we support over 1,000 people daily, and I have about 2 reports a week of significant behaviors where we had to respond with staff having to really de-escalate somebody. So as you can see, the incidents are very minimal, and I don't want anyone to be caught up or worried about that. Okay. The other thing is that interfering behaviors are very subjective, and they have to be taken in context. So in other words, what I mean by that is, while some of you sitting in the audience may not be used to seeing some of these behaviors, others of us recognize and understand the context of that behavior. So for example, we may have an individual who likes to sit in their chair and rock like this. Okay? Now, you may not normally be around someone who sits in a chair and rocks that way. That is not a significant or interfering behavior for that person. That may just be the way they self-soothe themselves if they feel a little overstimulated. So that's what I mean by context and understanding the context of a behavior. So the next thing I want to talk about is person-centered language. And this is a big thing that I like to stress. So in this slide, if we can go to the slide that says person-centered language, Shelby. I think it's past all this stuff. Oh, you guys are getting all the examples. This is what we talked about early. Too many transitions in my slides, in my PowerPoint slides. So we'll keep going until we see the person-centered language. When we get there, what you're going to see is a little comic strip, and I hope you guys can see it up on the board. There's a woman, a very well-intentioned woman, speaking to a gentleman who's in a wheelchair. And so she's speaking to him, and there's the bubble, and you'll see it right now. And so what her bubble says above her head is it says, "So what do you prefer to be called? Handicapped, disabled, or physically challenged?" And the gentleman in the wheelchair is responding to her, and he says, "Joe would be fine." Okay. And this is one of my favorite slides because it just shows that the person coming to assist Joe is very well intentioned, and they want to be politically correct, and they want to say the right thing. But really, the right thing to say is what you would say to anyone else that you were greeting. So anyone else you were meeting for the first time, you would ask them what their name is, and the conversation would go from there. You can keep going. Ah, there's the slide. Yeah. The writing is really small. So it says at the bottom, the most appropriate label is usually the one people's parents have given them. All right. So we're going to go to the next slide. Um, and so now is the most important part of the training and the most important thing you need to know. And that is that the main focus of this night is to have a good time. And so if you're a volunteer, what I'm stressing, especially in the buddies, what I'm looking for is you guys have to be the party starters. Okay? Because usually in a dance, any type of dance or social event like that, you're going to have a lot of people who are shy. And we want to have a party that's lit, that's turned up, right? So I need you guys to be the ambassadors of fun. That is the main focus for the night. Okay? These are some of the things, if we can go to the next slide, this is some of the things that talk about how we're going to communicate with our guests. We can hit one more time, Shelby. So, just some reminders I want to give you. The first is, don't be afraid to engage in casual conversation. As I said, just like when you meet anyone else new, I want you guys to really want to encourage you guys to engage in casual conversations about, how are you? What's your name? What do you like to do? Stuff like that. The other one is one that's really important to my heart because I've seen it so often doing this for the last 16, 17 years is please use age appropriate voice intonation. Now we're going to have guests that are from 14 to whatever age they are. We didn't close it off. So what I mean by using appropriate voice intonation is when I meet Eddie, I'm not going to say, "Hi, Eddie, how are you doing? How are you today, Eddie?" Okay. First of all, Eddie's an adult. Okay. He's well into his 20s. So I'm going to address him like an adult who's well into his 20s. Okay. Not like he's a 4-year-old who just learned a couple of his first phrases in English. Okay. The second one that goes along with that is watching your voice volume. Now, we may have some guests that are hearing impaired, and you may have to raise your voice a little bit to speak with them, but I guarantee you that most people, if not all of our guests, are not going to have a hearing impairment. So you don't have to raise your voice and say, "How are you tonight?" You don't have to speak like that. You can use your same inside voice that you would use speaking to anyone else, okay? One that I like to review with people, especially people who don't have a lot of experience with our population who has special needs, is I would like you to ask an individual before touching them. Okay? Now, some of us are naturally touchy-feely people. My wife, I think she's not in the audience right now, but my wife loves hugs. She loves to talk to people and put her hand on their shoulder and just address them really warmly, and she's great at it, and she's really engaging with people, and I love that about her. In this situation, I would ask you to just please ask before you touch someone if they're okay with that. Some of our guests are going to be really sensitive to touch and have other sensory issues, and it's a really important thing, and it allows them the respect to tell you sure, absolutely, or no, thank you. Next thing is, don't be afraid to ask for clarification when needed. Generally, when I start working with one of our new individuals, if they have some sort of speech impairment, it may take me as long as up to a couple months to kind of learn the intonation of their voice and their speech pattern to understand them. So it's important that I'm not afraid to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said. Can you please repeat that?" Okay? It's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I want to make sure that I understand what they're telling me. Next thing is, it's kind of what I talked about in this keeping a positive affect. Again, you're the ambassadors of fun on this night, so I want you to kind of keep a uplifted affect when you're speaking to people. Um, Keeping personal stuff personal. Um, this is an evening where we're working with new guests that maybe you've never met before. So this is not the evening to share all the troubles going on with your boyfriend or girlfriend. How you're struggling you're struggling in school or to pay rent or anything like that. This is the evening to have fun. So we're gonna leave that stuff personal. And the last thing is, I would ask you guys to just make sure, as you're sitting at your table, as you're dancing, as you're having fun, try to make sure you include everyone in the conversation or in what's going on. And what I mean by that is, we may have some people that are very shy. We may have some people, some guests that aren't party animals and want to get out there on the dance floor. I would just ask that you try to be inclusive of everyone. So if you guys are having a great conversation at the table, but you see Jose sitting off to the side and kind of really quiet, just try to remember to bring him into the conversation as well. Okay. And then one more slide, Shelby. And this is my last slide. And like I said, it's a very broad and simple overview. But if you leave with nothing else from this training, I want you to leave understanding the fact that all we're trying to do is throw a party. Okay, that's simply what we're trying to do. It just happens to be a party where we've invited some guests who have special needs, but really, we want them to have fun. We want them to take pictures. We want them to dance. We want them to have some good food. And we want to provide an opportunity for them to have a special night and for their caretakers to have a chance to relax for a couple hours as well.